The law is clear. Parents are responsible for more than just money. They are responsible for the overall welfare of the children. In a small town in Lagos, there lived a family that once seems full of potentials. John and Sarah were married when they were young, full of hope and dream for their future together. They were blessed with 4 children: Michael, the eldest son; Miriam, the eldest daughter. Then came John and David, the youngest twins. At first, things seemed normal and the family looked like any others. As time passes, the cracks in the marriage began to show, and the children were left to suffer the consequences. John, the father, was a man who believed that his role in the family was only to provide financially. He would drop money at home and disappear for months. His job paid well, and he made sure to leave enough for food, school fees, and bills. But that was where his involvement ended. John has grown distance between his wife and children. He spent his time traveling from city to city, enjoying the company of his friends and mistresses. He felt free, unbothered by the responsibility waiting for him at home. Sarah, his wife, initially struggled with John's absence. She tried to be a good wife and a good mother to her children, but after years of being neglected, she gave up. If John could live his life without caring, why shouldn't she? She began to go out more often, attending parties, meeting other men, and ignoring her duty as a mother. Sarah would leave the children and the house chores unattended to. She too will go for months without looking back, neither caring for her children. The house became a place of confusion. The children were left alone with no one to guide them, love them, or care for them. Michael, the eldest, tried to step up and take care of his younger ones, but he was just a child himself. At 14, he had to manage the home, cook, help with their own works, and handle the stress of not knowing when or if his parents would come back. Michael and his siblings grew up missing their parents. There was enough food on the table, but love and care were absent. Every day they could come home from school to an empty house. Michael, who has been forced to grow up fast, often wondered why his parents did not love them enough to stay. He carried the responsibility of the father and the mother on his head. He always assured his junior ones that one day it will be better. One day, mommy and daddy, they will come to us. They will love us. He took on the responsibility of taking care of his younger siblings while trying to navigate the challenges of his own teenage years. Miriam, the second child, was sensitive and bright, but their parents' absence affected her deeply. She felt unwanted and unloved. She often locked herself in her room, refusing to talk to anyone, not even her brothers or her sisters. She withdrew from her friends, even in the school, and began to struggle in the school. Teachers noticed her changes, but no one seems to understand her or what she was going through. The twins, Joy and David. Joy and David were 10 years old when their mother started disappearing from the house. They did not understand why their parents were not around. They longed for hugs and attention, for someone to care about their schoolwork and listen to their story, but no one to put them to sleep. Mommy and daddy are not around. The house that should have been filled with love was silent. No laughter, no warmth, only emptiness. As the year passed, things get worse. John rarely come home, and when he did, it was only to drop money and leave again. He avoided his children and ignored the growing distance between them. Sarah stopped pretending to care about her family. She continued going out, sometimes not returning for days. The children were left alone to fend for themselves, with no emotional or psychological support. Because of their absence in their children's life, Michael dropped out of school at the age of 18 to find work and support his sickness. His dream of becoming an engineer faded, and he took a job as a mechanic. He grew with pains and anger, but still he has no choice. He wouldn't abandon his Sydneys the way his parents has abandoned them. Miriam, once a bright and hopeful girl, fell into depression. She failed her exam repeatedly and dropped out of school. She began to hang around with wrong crowd, seeing the love and affections she couldn't receive from her parents at home. By the time she turned 19, she was addicted to drugs and has run away from home several times. The twins, Joy and David, suffers in their own way. Joy became aggressive, always fighting with her peers and getting into trouble at school. David, on the other hand, withdraw into himself, speaking only when necessary and becoming isolated from everyone around him. Both struggles with mental health, unable to understand why their parents did not care about them. It wasn't until Michael turns 25 and his Sydneys were their early 20s that they realized they could no longer live this way. They had spent their entire life suffering because of their parents' neglect, and they were tired of it. The years of emotional and psychological abuse has taken their toll on them, and they knew they needed help. One day, after a particular bad fight between Miriam and Joy, Michael decided that enough was enough. He gathered his Sydneys together and proposed something they had never thought about before: seeking legal help. He has heard about cases where children has taken their parents to court for neglect and thought it sounded extreme, but he believed it was their only chance to get justice and possibly healed. At first, Miriam and Joy were against the idea. They could not imagine taking their own parents to court, despite everything they has been through. David, however, was quiet but supportive. He believed that this might be the only way they could get their lives back on track. Eventually, all the four of them agreed. They were adults now, and they had the right to stand up for themselves. John and Sarah's children, the four of them, approaches a lawyer who specializes in families law, detailing the years of neglect, emotional abuse, and abandonment they have suffered at the hand of their parents. The lawyer listened carefully and agreed to take their case. The case was filed under the Child Rights Act, a law designed to protect children from neglect and ensure that their parents fulfill their duties. Although the children were now adults, the years of neglect has lasting effects on their lives, and the lawyer argued that their parents should be held accountable. When John and Sarah were served with the court papers, they were shocked. They had never imagined that their children could take such drastic action. John in particular, felt betrayed, while Sarah remained indifferent, as she has never been for several years. The court hearings were emotional. Michael, Miriam, Joy, and David all testified, recounting their painful childhood and the impact their parents' neglect has on their lives. It was difficult for them to narrate those memories, but they knew it was necessary for their healings. In the end, the court ruled in favor of the children. John and Sarah were held responsible for their negligence and ordered to attend family counseling. The judge also ordered them to provide financial compensation to their children for the emotional and physiological damage they have caused over the years. The court rulings did not magically fix anything, but it was a start. Michael, Miriam, Joy, and David began therapy to deal with the years of trauma they have endured. Slowly, they started to rebuild their lives, supporting each other through the healing processes. John and Sarah attended counseling as well. For the first time in years, they were forced to confront the damage they had done to their family. John, filled with regret, tried to reconcile with his children but the wounds were deep. Sarah, though less emotional, realized that he has wasted years chasing temporal pleasure while neglecting the most important people in her life. It has been some months since the court ordered counseling for John and Sarah, and though some change has been made, the damage from the past lingered. Michael, Miriam, Joy, and David find it hard to move forward no matter how much their parents tried. The scars of neglect and abandon run too deep. One evening, the Sydney gathered at Michael's small apartment. The atmosphere was thick with frustrations as they talk about the relationship between their parents. Michael has just come back from counseling section with their father, and it wasn't good at all. They don't understand, Michael said, shaking his head. They think a few sections of counseling can fix everything they have done for the past 20 years. We spent 20 years of our life without them. That is nothing. We can just forget about them forever. Miriam nodded, her eyes tight with emotion. I don't even know what it is to have a parent. All those years, I felt invisible. They can't make up for those years that they have left us. Good 20 years. David, the quiet one, as usual, listened carefully. What did you mean? He asked. Held accountable for what? He asked. Joy, as usual, was angry. They walked away from us, and now they just want us to forgive them because they feel guilty. It is not possible. It is not fair. They should be held responsible for everything that has gone wrong with us. Joy turned to her brother, David. I mean, we should do more. We should do more. More than just talking to them in counseling. We should make them know that we are feeling pain. We should make them realize what they have pushed us through. They neglected us for years, and there has to be a way to get justice for what they have done to us. Michael raised his eyes low. You are saying we should sue them? Do you mean we should sue our parents? Joy nodded. Why not? We have the right to. They abandoned us. They left us to raise ourselves all by ourselves. While they were there, living their life, we are here suffering. We suffer to get to where we are today. Now they want to come, just like that. No, we should sue them. Miriam hesitated, suing her parents. Is that the real answer? It is not about revenge. Joy continued. It is about making them see that they can't just walk away from what they did. They broke the law by neglecting us, and we deserve justice for that. Maybe this is the only way they can really understand. The next day, the Sydneys visited a law firm that specializes in family law and child rights cases. They were nervous as they sat in the waiting room, but determined to go through with their decisions. When they were called inside the lawyer's office, a middle-aged woman with a kind eyes greeted them. Her name was Mrs. Dickey, and she has handled several cases involving child neglect and abuse in the time past. Tell me your story, Mrs. Dickey said gently. They all narrated what has been happening for the past 20 years, how their father left the house and also their mother. Mrs. Dickey listened carefully, taking note as they spoke. When they finished, she sat back in her armchair and folded her hands. This is a difficult case, she began, but you have a strong foundation. The Child Rights Act of 2003 clearly states that parents are responsible not only for providing financial support, but also for the emotional and psychological well-being of their children. For what you have told me, your parents neglected their responsibility for many years. This kind of neglect can have long-term effects, as you have all experienced. Can we sue them? Joy asked. Yes, you can, Mrs. Dickey replied. Although you are all adults now, the neglect you suffer as children has had lasting consequences. We can argue that their actions or lack of actions violate your rights under the Act of Child Rights. You have the right to seek compensation for the emotional and psychological damage they caused. Mariam looked worried. But what about the fact that they gave us money? Our father makes sure we had food and pay for school fees even when he's not around. Providing financial support does not absolve them of their other responsibility, Mrs. Dike explained. Parents are required to provide more than just money. They are supposed to nurture, care for, and guide their children. Neglecting that duty can cause serious harm, as we all seen in your own case. Michael was a little bit happy. So what is the next thing now? I will file a lawsuit on your behalf, Mrs. Dike said. We will take your parents to court and present evidence of neglect you have experienced. You will need to testify about the emotional and psychological impact this has on you, and we may bring in an expert to speak about how neglect can affect children long term. We are ready, Michael said. A few months later, the case went to trial. The Sidneys stood in the courtroom, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. John and Sarah were there too, looking uncomfortable and defensive. They had hired their own lawyer, who planned to argue that they had fulfilled their duties as parents by providing financially for their children. As the trial began, Michael took the stand first. He spoke about the years of abandonment, about how he has been forced to take on the role of a parent when he was still a child. He described the emotional toll it took on him and how it affects his ability to pursue his own dreams. Next, Mary took the stand. She cried as she spoke about how neglected she has felt, how she had struggled with depression and isolation, and how she has made destructive choices just to feel noted. She described the long-lasting impact their parents' neglect has on her self-esteem and mental health. Joy, filled with anger, passionately described how she and her Sidneys has been left to fend for themselves. They did not care about us, she said. They only care about themselves. And now, after all these years, they want us to just forgive. No, they have to face what they have done. David's testimony was quite deep and powerful. I have lived most of my life feeling invisible. I did not have parents. I had Sidneys who tried to take care of me, but no guidance, no love, and it affected every part of my life. The courtroom was silent after David had spoken. The lawyer for John and Sarah argued that they had fulfilled their responsibility by providing financially. Mrs. Dike countered with the argument that neglect is not just about money. She called an expert. The psychologist explained how the lack of parental care and effects can lead to issues like depression, anxiety, societal withdrawal, and difficulties forming relationships, all of which the Sidneys has experienced. After days of testimony and argument, the court finally reached a verdict. While it is true that you provided financially for your children, the judge began, you failed in your most important duty to nurture, care for, and to guide them emotionally and psychologically. Your neglect had serious, long-lasting consequences on their mental health and well-being. The law is clear. Parents are responsible for more than just money. They are responsible for the overall well-being of their children. The court rules in favor of the children. John, Sarah, Joy, and David were ordered to be paid compensation for the emotional and psychological damage their neglect has caused. Additionally, the court mandated continuous family counseling to help repair the broken relationships. As the ruling was announced, the Sidneys sat in astonished silence. It was over. They have won.
Kindly subscribe to my channel, drop your comments, thumbs up and click the notification bell so that you will know when next